Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Irish Theatre Institute this morning for an information session on digital production planning as part of ITI's Accelerate programme. I won't keep you too long. I'd like to kick it off pretty quickly, just to say that ITI's Accelerate programme comprises of information sessions such as this, workshops, masterclasses, mentoring and training. It's aimed at addressing issues encountered by independent theatre artists and workers. Do keep an eye on our YouTube channel for past information sessions which are available there. For this session, we're focusing on digital production planning, and for that, we've asked the wonderful John Gunning, digital integrator, to join us this morning. So I'm going to hand over now to you, John.
Thanks, Lee. Good morning, everyone. That's just my face on the screen. Excellent. My name is John Gunning. From 2015 to early 2020, I was primarily a lighting designer, and then suddenly decided to change my career for reasons of my own, nothing to do with the pandemic. Then I'm a founding member of Malaprop Theatre. As a technician, I have done shows from West Kerry to Australian opera houses. I come from a background of Dublin Youth Theatre and the Lear Academy, where I learned how to do stuff from nothing originally and then how to make it safe after that. Just for context, in March 2020, I started organising a series of play reads online after lockdown started. That was how I began to kind of my work as a digital integrator. Since then, I have made or collaborated on video pieces, on choose your own adventure operas, and on regular old plays which were shot for viewing. So that's my kind of expertise. The context I'm going to come to you with for this session is that I'm confident that the last year has planted the seed of a new participatory art form called digital production, or that's what we're calling it right now. We probably haven't a better name for it in a few years. And I don't think we've seen exactly what it looks like, but it is shaped so far by what hasn't worked and what has worked in the kind of scramble to move from live events to digital events over the last year and a half. So the stuff that we've seen that has worked has been much more accessible. Fundamentally, that's the one thing I hope we take from this, if nothing else. Ticket prices are a bit more manageable in general. Times in which people can access work is now much more flexible because stuff that is online for 24 hours is on for all of that 24 hours. And travel, I can see stuff in London and New York from Dublin. People in London and New York can see stuff in Dublin. People in Mullingar can see stuff in Dublin. This new format has allowed, as I mentioned there, asynchronicity, which I'll come back to a couple of times. Asynchronicity is, I think, the new defining feature of digital work, and it's the defining feature of the digital communication age. So you're able to communicate with someone meaningfully without having to be on the phone or directly face to face. Messages can be left, videos can be left, and come back to in individuals' convenience, which is a fundamental shift in how that works. Like if I am used to having to go to a play at 7 p.m. and suddenly I can watch it when I'm awake, which might not be at 7 p.m. It's just a huge shift in access. It's a huge shift in how we experience all artwork, particularly live art, particularly live engaged art. And also, we have been able to make bespoke experiences much more easily. Work that is defined maybe by its space in your own home and defined by your own context. For example, something like the dark field work. You make audio plays for people to listen to in their own bedrooms in a certain setup, or Luke Casserly and Shannon May Breen's work in Fringe last year, which involved going to your local area, kind of a green space. And that work is bespoke because it's only able to be experienced by you where you are. There's been some really bad stuff, though, about the kind of rush to digital work. archival material has been rushed out at the very start of the lockdown just to kind of fill a gap and keep people conscious. And it's been work that's never really intended to show off the quality of the art. So that's been the frustration, I think, for artists particularly, is the expectation that you might make something that is intensely private and not at all for public consumption more available. I think that might be dying off as a trend, but it is hard to tell. But I'm hopeful. There are technological barriers to access as well. Like, we can talk about how asynchronous access is brilliant, but you do need to be able to access something through an email or online or digital. There's 100 reasons why people would have trouble accessing, particularly in Ireland, where in rural areas there's very poor internet access, or just people who are not used to it. Like, ironically, the shows at the Gate, I had trouble with the emails. So it's hard to imagine that the Gate regular audience had a lot of fun accessing the show through those emails. And then we also lose the sense of occasion, the intimacy and the bespoke setting of playing something. You can make a setting in a theater or in a off-site space. You have the intimacy of being in a room with a person. You're in a room with a lot of people, and there's something lost in the translation of moving that same style, assuming that same connection, into an online forum. They're not necessarily they don't translate one to one. That's what I'm trying to say there. There is intimacy available in digital work, but it is a different kind of intimacy. And the unfortunate line I keep coming back to whenever I try and write this out is that intimacy online requires control, which sounds abusive in a way that I don't think artists want to be towards their audience. So it's very it's a dangerous line to tread, and it's one that I think is probably going to be the big thing that we're talking about for the next while as we're making digital work. But as I say, this new digital genre is waiting to form fully. We only need the skills to shape it. I understand this is usually more of a lecture vibe, but at this point, I would love to just ask the room if they could just say hello and just let me know, are you currently making a piece of digital work? And maybe a 5-word synopsis of what you're thinking it is. Just because the next couple of sections are going to be informed by where people are, and then we can kind of cover what we miss separately. Is that possible technologically where we are, Lee? Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If anyone just
Great.
wants to raise their hand or unmute themselves or put their video on.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, how are you?
Thanks for this session today. It's really, really informative. So the stage where I'm at, so I'm just the founder of just a new sort of we're actually a social enterprise, but kind of mingled within like the media and entertainment and the arts as well.
Right.
So everything we want to do is digitally native, actually, and we were a COVID baby. So our whole goal as the social enterprise, our mission is to, in the social enterprise is called Gorm Media. So as a social enterprise, our mission is to curate common ground through conversations that matter, and it's all going to be digitally native in sort of like a digital production piece. So right now we're just preparing for our pilot in-person project. I don't come from production background or anything. My background is actually psychology, but we're preparing for an in-person pilot project that is in the synopsis is trying to understand the stories, the nuances and experiences of people of different socialized group, particularly people in marginalized community. So excuse me. So that's where we're at.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Any other heads who'd like to share it? I'm not going to get into like the detail of everyone just because there's a lot of ground to cover. But if one or two people just want to shout it, just so I can get a sense of where people are at and what they're making. If not, I'm very happy to move on.
Hi, just to
Hey,
say, my name is Orla, and I suppose this year, because of the pandemic, I've been trying to up my skills, which have been challenging in terms of working with technology. So I've used digital media to create stories, and I'm also working with a youth theatre, and we've turned to using like making films as
great.
our theatre this year, and we got a couple of grants towards that. So yeah, really trying to embrace digital media and how, I can use it more and more.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Louise, and I run a small company called Play Make Believe. And this year we started kind of incorporating video storytelling to kids in schools. So we're trying to roll out a program now where we'll be able to do like storytelling to children, and then hopefully we'll have like an in-person aspect of it, where after watching a series of videos, that the characters from the TV will come and interact with the children in person.
Unless anyone else has something they urgently want to take out, keep going. That's great, though. That's a really good mix of fields. So I think the thing you get a sense of immediately when looking at what people are actually doing in a digital context is the audience experience is completely different every time, in a way that it's generally not in a live theatre event. There are a lot of common grounds when you go to see a play, such as you show up before the play starts, you walk into a room where the play is happening, and then you leave when the play ends. That's not so formalized in digital work, and I don't think it should be. I think that's a benefit of the format, or of the genre. I'm going to find loads of different words to describe that as we go on. So the first question, as a digital artist, I would recommend anyone to ask themselves is, what's my point of engagement? Where do I meet the audience? So we have there a couple of different examples. I think, Momo, you were saying about the first thing you're doing is an in-person thing, but you're eventually going to be making some kind of communal messaging thing for focusing on digitally native people, or a digitally native platform, which is a really good defining point of how you talk about your audience. If you say this is for an audience who are comfortable in the digital realm, who are from here, who are from the internet, you get to have kind of a lot more access. You're not making allowances for people who are less comfortable, allowances for people who don't know language or who don't know means of access. People who might be more comfortable with custom URLs, as in custom website addresses, and the like. Whereas Orla and Louise, you're both talking about engaging with young people directly. And young people, of course, at the moment are completely online all the time, but have a very interesting relationship where they have a much less bespoke or refined understanding of the internet. So they're good at using kind of consumer end tools when they're accessing by themselves as well, because obviously I think both of you were talking about curated or not custodianized, facilitated experience making digital work. And obviously how you present that digital work, particularly if it's young people making, is impacted. So there's a couple of like formats that you can think of. There's a kind of couple of traditional formats, or traditional as much as they've been established, with your point of engagement. I'm just thinking of this from an audience's point of view. So if you're going to see a piece of digital work or a piece of digital live art, there's a good chance that what you'll get as your first point of contact when you're going to see the show is an email with a 4-digit code and a blue link somewhere. So that means obviously that you're hosting something separately, you're communicating with them directly through a known communication channel like an email, and that there is a bit of agency and responsibility put on the audience member to get themselves in the door. You might go much simpler. You might say, here's a text message with a website, which would be really good for a digitally native audience who might primarily watch content on their phones. So it's literally just a case of, here it is, click the link and it'll bring you through. Obviously, from a production end, that means you have to be building something that can connect directly from one URL. It probably means you don't have password access, or you might have to send on password access separately. It's usually much more bespoke and direct, which is a blessing and a curse. It's just a quality rather than a negative or a positive. Or you can go really out there. Like, there's loads of ways that you can integrate the kind of physical world with the digital world. Maybe you just get a postcard with a QR code that you have to scan in. And obviously that means you're getting an engagement with the physical world. But you also have to have the knowledge to know how to scan a QR code. I think if my dad got a QR code in the post, he would just have a panic attack. So I probably wouldn't do that for him. So that point of engagement, and I will get into specifics shortly, but just I think it's good to think about this stuff in the abstract. That point of engagement is really useful as your kind of first question about how the audience engages with the piece, which seems obvious, but also it's not a question that you have to ask yourself necessarily in a theatre, because your first point of engagement is they're already in. So you're looking at maybe like an informal situation or a much more formal situation. It's amazing how much difference like a text message and an email have in that formality. And those two inform and are informed by the content of the piece. So a ticketed event via something like EventSolve or Dice FM, which is then just a video served directly to the audience, which is probably something I'd say everyone here has seen at this point. You know, something like the Druid shows, the Gate show, all of those where you know, some kind of pre-recorded or else live broadcast video that just went out at a certain time and then stayed up, and you went through a link by buying a ticket. You only got access to that. That does mean, in a practical sense, that you have to find someone to do your ticketing for you. So a company like EventSolve or Dice, and then also have somewhere to host that video that is compatible. And you get only a certain amount of control over how that appears. So a lot of the time what it'll be is just clicking through and eventually you end up on a YouTube link. So your sense of occasion is impacted, you know what I mean? But very handy because it's recognizable, it's easy, people trust it, it's very straightforward from a production point of view. It's possible as well to have your point of engagement be something like the entire content of your show is just hosted on a custom website. So perhaps you send out that link with the video on it, or there's an opportunity for a very unique engagement where you can build, you know, website building I think is going to be one of the big skills in this genre, where you can build unique environments effectively. That's obviously a much more resource intensive option. I'll get into like staffing and thinking about how people should prepare to have people on their team later. But if you're talking about building a website for your show where people might go through various layers of the website to access new sections, or even if it's just a well-designed area to watch the video of the performance you're trying to show, you're talking about someone who has the skills to hook that up, skills to make a website design look well and to work well across multiple platforms, because people will join across tablets, phones, laptops. And also to balance those kind of things, sorry, not to balance those kind of things, that's very vague. To balance the ticketed event versus custom hosting or custom placing, it's worth looking at like the cost of your website construction obviously means staff, hosting costs, domain costs, versus a commission on tickets. Always a good thing to think about, because if you're in a position where maybe you're, as I think the ARC show recently had about 12,000 people watching, which is a huge number. And so I don't know what the story is, what their commission deal, but it just means that there's a lot of money moving somewhere. And it might be that it's easier to host something rather than to pay €1 on every ticket you sell. Also worth bearing in mind the complexity of access. I've talked about this already in terms of like having a panic attack. You can see a QR code. But the easier it is to get onto the show, the better. Just the more pleasant an experience it is, the more positive people will have an experience of it and be more willing to engage with the work as you're going to present it. Like I said earlier, I mean, I work in tech full time, and I have always had trouble with emails from Dice FM. I just can't find the codes on them because they're just designed in a certain way. So it can be that simple. It can be that simple as it might be in a place where it's very difficult to find a code, or it could be something like you want to create something on a platform that you need an app to access. You know, like there are great platforms that offer loads of control. Something like maybe Discord, which offers video options and chat options, and is actually a really good place for community building, but is relatively complex to set up. So it's probably maybe not suitable, or else puts a responsibility to train on the creator, to train your audience, or to give them the skills to participate in your work in a way that you don't necessarily have to do with a live event, or don't have to do so formally. So thinking about other points of engagement, it's worth bearing in mind that you're not married to video content. I think a lot of people in their move to digital have assumed digital means video. It's always worth assessing that, because the toughest section of the attention economy to break into is video online. Because if you make a video, then you're not competing with Project Cube at the same time. You're competing with Netflix and YouTube. So there are really brilliant experiences you can provide and brilliant experiences you can make, and really interesting ways of engaging with an audience digitally through something like audio, as maybe a podcast or just single downloads. As I mentioned earlier, Darkfield do audio only shows where they place you in a place in your house, tell you to set up the room in a certain way, and then give you a stereo image so that you have a sensation of things happening around you. It's phenomenal work. It's really interesting, and like the conversion to making stuff that works in anyone's home pretty well is really impressive. I'd really recommend trying out some of their shows. The other thing I'll just mention about audio experiences, and we'll bring something a bit later, is that if you set up a situation where you're downloading individual files per device, it's incredibly stable. I've had a nightmare this morning with my internet just not connecting. So at one point I was like, I'm going to have to do this entire talk to my phone. But if I have a downloaded MP3, I don't have to worry about my audience losing signal midway through the show and kind of completely losing the sense of the show. Also worth looking at other formats where maybe it's one-to-one or broadcast messaging rather than something as simple as like a video or audio that you play. So something like WhatsApp is a brilliant place to play and to perform. It allows for multimedia, which is great. So it allows for video and audio. It allows for really informal messaging like GIFs, smileys, and emojis. And it allows for really formal text and traditional video performance, and even live responsiveness if you want to build that in. Not to plug my own stuff, but Malaprop are doing a show over WhatsApp. I think it's next week. As part of the Edinburgh Fringe, which does happen entirely in WhatsApp. I think I genuinely think it's a really interesting format and maybe something worth looking at. Hashtag SponCon. So that's the practicalities point of view of the point of engagement. Is that's the first question to consider, and then it will inform everything. Or it's the first question to consider once you know you want to make something digital, is that you need to know the point at which you're meeting the audience. So having talked about that in the very vague, general, emotional sense, we might go through platforms and the kind of technical skills and things that they provide. If you hear me say something, I'm not going to do loads of links and stuff immediately, but if you hear something that sounds useful, just make a note and ping me at the end, and I will send you a link to what that is. Most of what I'm going to talk about here is freely available software, so it's very accessible. And if you're at all curious, it's really worth having a look. So, like I was saying, I mean, I know I kind of made a plea there to step away from the live video, but it is the primary form. So if you want to do live broadcasting, actual live broadcasting, you'll require a broadcasting software. I don't know if people do know that or don't know that. That might be very basic. So something like OBS Studio, which is a really powerful free software. I think if you're at all interested in making online work, it's worth downloading and playing with that because it's free. It's incredibly powerful. It's a little bit unwieldy because it's like made for people who just mess around on Windows all day, like massive nerds like me. But it has the capability of broadcasting out to basically any platform. So YouTube, Vimeo, Twitch, bespoke stuff like you can set it to connect to your own servers if you want to, if you have that capability, or Eventive. You know, it's a really good back-end tool. It allows you the tools to kind of make quite a lot of video editing stuff on the fly. So it like has green screen and filters and massive kind of placement choices, and you can live mix video as it's coming in, and you can live mix multiple sources and live direct a broadcast if you set yourself up for it. It is complicated to get started, but it is very usable once you're going. Another software called Streamlabs OBS. Both of these are called OBS because OBS, I think, is Open Broadcasting Software. It's just what that means. Which is a simpler, much more direct software. It's designed mostly for video game streamers, so you'll probably find if you get into it that it's maybe a little not of the aesthetic you might want for video content from a theater company going out. And again, you might, I mean, video game streaming is very popular. Anyway, it's free. It's very powerful. It's natively compatible with phones, which is a really interesting idea. I think it's possible to just do a live broadcast straight from your phone that you have much more control over than a kind of standard like Instagram live. Also worth mentioning a software called Yellow Duck. This is turning into just a list of stuff that you can get, but it is very useful stuff. Yellow Duck is a good interpolation software that allows you to go out on Instagram Live. So if you have an Instagram audience and you want to do a very sophisticated broadcast, particularly something like maybe green screen or video overlays and stuff, Yellow Duck is your lifesaver there. So once you have your broadcast set up, it's worth thinking about where you're going to host live video. Just a few pros and cons of the really big players. So Vimeo, I'm sure we all are aware of, which is stable. It plays incredibly well with ticketing softwares sorry, I said EventSolve earlier, but it's TicketSolve is the company. It's got a very back end appearance, so it doesn't feel intrusive in the way that I'm always very conscious when I'm watching a video on YouTube that I'm watching a YouTube video, which has kind of connotation for me, but maybe not for you. It's very good for pre-recorded content. It's what I'd recommend for pre-recorded content to go out to a mass audience, particularly because it doesn't compress as much, which just means that the quality remains basically as you see it as you're editing. It has a new live capability that I've not tested, so I'm not going to recommend that either way. I mentioned the quality in Vimeo because YouTube is obviously the massive video platform. What a ridiculously obvious thing to say. Hugely recognizable. You're never going to have a problem asking someone to click through to a YouTube video in the way that you could have with a Vimeo link or with an unrecognized link in an email. Again, it's back-end friendly. It's also good at pre-record, but there is a big quality hit. So if you're making really fine quality video work, it can take a hit. I bring that up not because I think it's going to be a massive issue. It's more an issue for like filmmakers who are doing full-on film shoots with all of the production and post-production entailed in that. They just lose the quality of their work. But it is worth knowing there is a quality hit with YouTube. So it's going to impact how your presentation of your work looks. It also is really good for live video. It's changed in the last year. I didn't use it at the start of the year, but it's really good for live broadcasts. It's really good because people generally tend to have it installed, so you can kind of set up for people to get reminders on the YouTube app that brings them straight into the video if they want to, which is huge because, again, attention economy in video content is huge. So you need to remind people at the exact point that you want them to be engaging with it, that they should start to engage, because they will. They'll just forget, or I forget. And then just another platform. Again, these are all freely accessible. YouTube did have a limit on, like, you had to have 1,000 subscribers before you can broadcast. They've gotten rid of that since the pandemic started, thankfully. But they do also have an option to live broadcast directly from mobile, which is currently where the 1,000 subscriber limit is. But as I was saying, with something like Streamlabs, going in through as they call it, an encoder, but it's broadcasting software, that's very possible to just do on a YouTube video anyway. Thirdly, recommend a website called Twitch, which is a less known website. I'm sure someone here has used it. I used it primarily at the start of the pandemic because it's easy to click through to, and also has kind of, I think, a connotation of something slightly different to what you're expecting. But it is primarily for live streaming content, primarily built for video game players. Basically, you want to play video games on streams. I'm sure you all know about this. It's got a good suite of features for recurring events. So if you're doing anything kind of like a live recurring event that you want to be able to reference back to, it natively has loads of really interesting stuff, like it'll automatically record and it'll automatically try and present you with highlights of your last recording session. So it's interesting to look around in, and also it is distinct. So if you wanted to have kind of maybe a slightly unexpected presentation, I mean, all of that kind of just comes down to it's a different color, but I feel like at a certain point we've gotten so far into the symbology of the internet that things being a different color actually becomes hugely significant. So then the the next thing is to just think about, if you don't want to just have your content hosted, it's worth thinking about custom websites where you can present your content as you want it, where you can present the work as you want it. This is generally a relatively expensive way of providing it. You know, I can run a live video on YouTube right now for free, but if I want to have a well-presented website that allows me to play back stuff smoothly and have a reasonable number of people and have a reasonable amount of stuff on it, it's going to cost a bit of money. Hosting on something like Squarespace or Wix usually runs into the kind of mid-tens per year for a reasonable amount of bandwidth, going up into the low hundreds per year. So it's not overly expensive to host it. Again, I was saying, it allows for much more designed interface. It allows for a much more concentrated experience. That's the thing I would always think about with a website, is that it allows kind of explorability in a way that if you allow someone to explore around your video on YouTube, they just start watching a different video. But you can kind of give a guided tour of a place with a website. It's got a multimedia interface, so there's no reason why you can't have like very well presented text alongside video, alongside audio, alongside still images or reactive images. A good example of a kind of a website show might be something like, again, this is all just stuff that's happened in Ireland, is Zoonosis, which was the Dublin Youth Theatre show last summer, where a group of young people created an opera in 5 acts based around their pets, and you had to go on a kind of self-navigating guided or a self-guided tour of the opera, which is a really interesting format. I would recommend having a quick look through that as a sense of what the relatively low investment that was. One person on kind of the video, one person on creation of the website, one person on design, and then the young people who created the videos. So realistically, that's about 4 professionals on the creation of that website, just in terms of scale. So as I was saying there, just in terms of platforms, if you don't know them, Squarespace is a great place to go. It's very easy. It's a big name. It's cheap. It's very paint by numbers and big blocks. So it's not the best for a very malleable or very bespoke option. It's designed mainly for small businesses or portfolio websites. Another maybe more interesting one that is a little bit more difficult to use, but provides more freeform power, is a site called Wix, W-I-X, which will host, and again, these are both in the same price range, so it's all about personal preference. And the only thing there is, if you are making a custom website, it is worth it to think about registering a domain, and that registering a .ie domain is a pain in the hole. Brilliant. So some last thoughts on audio and then direct messaging, and then I might talk about staffing, and then I might see if anyone has any questions, if they're still there. If you're looking at doing direct downloads, probably the easiest, most reliable way is just looking at Bandcamp. If you are looking at making a serial audio, basically, if you're looking at a podcast, just do an RSS feed and upload it that way. It is just the best way to do it. Stuff like SoundCloud, unfortunately, is just not great anymore. It's kind of more trying to be a Spotify competitor than a place for interesting audio to be held. So if you want bespoke single units of audio to go out, Bandcamp is the way to go, which is free to the user. So then I think the really interesting form that is worth looking at again is direct messaging. I think that's the thing that I'm kind of really interested in at the moment anyway, personally. And this comes back to the point of engagement, is that if you want to have an experience which includes direct messaging, it's really important to meet people where they are. And in that case, it means kind of stuff that they already have. Because you can guide people onto your website, which you've built with whatever you have. You can bring people onto YouTube, broadcasting on whatever software you have. But ultimately, if I try and send you a text on WhatsApp and you don't have WhatsApp, then you just don't get to do the show. So it's worth thinking about places like WhatsApp, email, Facebook, as huge install bases, really powerful messaging, really powerful options to kind of influence your message, or change your message, or add in multimedia elements. as I was saying, like GIFs, video, sound, text, all goes through them really well. They all serve really well. Email is great because if you're emailing people on a browser, they have the option to kind of be guided around the internet to maybe another place and to come back. There's other other messaging programs or other places that have messaging capabilities more so. It's interesting to think about because again, that kind of like postmodern, everything can just be a different color and it becomes really meaningful. The kind of there's loads of really interesting spaces to disrupt with messaging and with messaging in a performance or artful way. Something like Instagram has loads of space for creating performances that are either tailored to the platform and aware of the platform, or maybe back end. So in like a group message function or a direct message function, and it's very restrictive in what it can do. So you can send expiring messages and you can send a very controlled visual aesthetic in your messages, or something like Snapchat, but the install base is a factor there. I don't know who still uses Snapchat except very young people and drug dealers. Also important not to discount the other spaces for weird communications. Chat boxes in YouTube videos. If you're running YouTube content, the directness of running stuff alongside chat boxes is really interesting. Or bringing people into like a Google Doc and having chat. There's a chat feature there that can be disruptive to the work. Anyway, those are just the other direct messaging things. But ultimately, for kind of broad appeal and for ease of use, meet people where they are. And that's kind of the most important thing across all things is the work has to be on the creator's end to meet people where they are at a certain point, or else you have to know your audience really well, because if you don't, then people will just disengage. You know, you're not a night out exactly. You're part of the attention economy. Yes, TikTok. I have that on my notes, and I said I wouldn't mention it because I can't tell you anything about TikTok. But yes, thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, so that's hosting and platforms. So then just a quick thought about how all that works in terms of staffing and timelines. The thing that you'll get caught out by really quickly when making work online is that there is a skill that you're going to need that you won't have, that you won't be used to not having, because we won't have occurred to you. In the past, that's come up as like surprisingly needing compositional work, so stuff that you would expect maybe to have in a traditional theatre production team. Or it could be, obviously, you're going to need a video editor and you're going to need someone to compile the video content that you're making, which is a very specialized skill. If you're making really fine quality video content, you might need to think about working with a videographer or a cinematographer. I would consider that in a primarily video context to be as important as having a set designer is for traditional theatre work, because it is the viewpoint of the entire thing. It's also important to remember sound recording. And I know I'm getting into just like, here's a list of things you should do if you're making digital work. But the thing they say as YouTube content creators, the thing that they say is that an audience will forgive a low quality image, but if it's unpleasant to listen to, that's when people tap out. So if you want people to engage, I'm conscious that because I've got like auto ducking and fans on in this room, my audio probably hasn't been great, which I'm going to take as an example and intentional now. So having decent sound record where you are is invaluable, and having a decent mix after the fact, and bearing in mind that on a video shoot, what tends to happen, I'm sure we're all aware, is that people forget about the sound recording and then panic. For the actual broadcasting of digital work, once you've made it, it's really important at some point to engage someone whose responsibility is the running of the stream itself. is the keeping live of the stream. It's not something that you can hand over to a stage manager, who's also running the show. It's not something you can hand over to like a lighting operator or a sound operator, because obviously it's the point at which it goes out into the world. So there needs to be a kind of a stated and understood responsibility for that. And I mean, a lot of the time it just looks like monitoring, but that's when it's going well. They're also that will be the person generally. When I have worked as a stream technician in the past, I've been the person who's set up the kind of directorial cues. So like the switching between cameras and the firing of playback into the stream, into feeds, or adding surtitles, removing surtitles. You know, kind of the stuff that like a TV director will do. Generally, that can compile into a stream tech job to be operated out. But it's a huge part of it to have as a separate thing. Don't assume you can get away with it, because it's going to impact massively on any live event, or even a non-live event that just needs to be broadcast in real time. And then finally, just to re-emphasize website building. So if you are looking at website building, I would always recommend working with someone who's more experienced in website building, unless you have that experience yourself. I know a lot of artists have built their own websites and are more comfortable with that end of things, but the difference between a portfolio website and an experiential website is huge. And as I was saying, like Zoonosis was one person, 3 weeks full time to create, on top of an entire production team also creating everything on top. You know, so if the director had decided I was going to make the website as well, then the show wouldn't have happened. You know, brilliant. So that is the kind of main hit lists. I've gone through that a little fast. On staffing and on hosting and on the point of engagement and how you create that work. That was probably a little dry for the last bit, but if anyone has any like specific questions, I'd love to have a chat now, if that's all right. Could I be unspotlighted if we wanted to go to like a gallery chat situation? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I might actually, Mogo, you mentioned about TikTok. Are you using TikTok?
Yeah, we were using, sorry, let me just try to upload my video. We were using TikTok, but kind of like died down because we started off as like a sort of Zoom orientated sort of web show, but and we're using TikTok to kind of like engage with, because our target audience is like younger people as well, so between the ages of 18 and 35. So we were using TikTok to kind of engage with the audience, but it's kind of like dwindled down now because we're focusing on the in-person pilot project. So once that project is out, we are going to create sort of snippet videos and highlight videos to engage with the audience on TikTok. And the people that are managing, because I was like, I don't know anything about TikTok either. So the people that are managing the TikTok are actually some undergrad students that are working with the project with us. They're like 18 and 19, know everything about the thing. So it's TikTok is just a great way to really not necessarily share your artwork or the project that you're doing, but really engage with the audience so they can have further influence or further push to go and see the actual full content. So what we do, and one thing that works in TikTok is either educational or funny videos. So one thing, we try to mix both of them in. So trying to get them to be laugh and be educated, and eventually link into our other projects and other larger video content.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's actually exactly why I didn't bring it up, because I didn't think it was conducive to a place to disseminate like longer form work. But it's as you're saying, like it seems like a really brilliant place to create communities and kind of bring people into the fold. Brilliant. So any other thoughts or questions or feelings from the house? Great. Walk away.
John, would you mind if I asked you one question? I'm thinking of everyone that's kind of heading towards project planning mode.
Yes.
No more than talking to a producer or production manager early on. If you're starting to even put towards funding of an idea, to consider, I suppose, the full scale of it, how early would you recommend chatting to the people who are going to be, you know, maybe looking after the digital side, whether that's the sound, the technician, or running the stream, or the production manager that might be considering the platforms and hosting we use?
I think right now my answer would be, as soon as you know you want to make a show online, you should be talking to someone who can facilitate that, because I think the example I was using at one point last year was, it's a bit like people are walking into a theater and going, wow, this is an amazing space. It would be great if we could make it look like it was nighttime, and then later on in the show it looked like it was daytime. You don't know what kind of person you'd get for that. You know, it's like you need a lighting designer, in the same way that you have those exact kind of things with a video or with a digital piece as you get to it. So it's kind of having someone who can interpret the skill, or the having the skill to interpret what the piece wants from a digital engagement, is a whole separate skill that needs to kind of be included amongst the very earliest things. It's just great, you know, it's site specific. It's like, as soon as you know you want to make it in a certain place, you need to have a sense of surveillance of the space, you know.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, along with the production manager, or certainly as early as possible.
Brilliant. Okay. If there are no other questions, and just give a chance to see, no, not mute myself. What I might do is I might just close out the session, if that's okay, formally, and then we can turn the recording off then for if anyone wants to chat at the very end. So just a very brief thank you so much. And thank you so much, John, for your time and expertise. I think with this being something that people will consider more and more in the future, with it being the future of touring, that digitally native pieces being made to the highest quality, as Irish theatre is made to the highest quality anyway, incorporating these skills and knowing, getting to grips with even the language. For me, I have a list of information that I did not know before this morning. So thank you so much for your time, John. Thank you everyone for joining us. And please do stay in touch with us. Accelerate is supported by the Innovate Together Fund from Rethink Ireland, and ITI is core funded by the Arts Council. Thank you.